You know, there are certain dates in history that just freeze time. September 11th, 2001 is absolutely one of those. Today, we're going to take a really close, objective look at the historical record of that Tuesday morning, exactly how it happened, who was behind it, and the long shadows it continues to cast over our world today.
But before we get into the details, we really have to acknowledge the sheer gravity of this tragedy. It didn't just alter a city's skyline, right? It literally rewrote the rulebook for global security, foreign policy, and honestly, the way we all travel and live today.
All right, so here's a quick look at how we've structured this analysis. We'll start with the events of that dark day, move on to the attackers and their conspiracy, examine the severe consequences, dive into the long-term investigations, and wrap up with the massive rebuilding efforts and memorials.
Okay, let's jump right into part 1, the dark day of September 11th.
Looking at the historical timeline, the most terrifying thing is just how fast it all happened. In less than 2 hours, just 2 hours, 4 commercial flights were literally weaponized. It all escalated with terrifying speed, starting at 8:46 a.m. when the first plane hit the North Tower. At that exact moment, first responders and the public were completely blind to the actual scale of what was unfolding, until, tragically, those towers came down. In the human cost, it was just staggering. We're talking about nearly 3,000 lives lost in a single morning. But, amidst all that apocalyptic destruction, we also saw this immediate, incredible mobilization of everyday heroism. Firefighters, police officers, civilian volunteers, they didn't run away. They ran straight into those collapsing structures, risking absolutely everything to save complete strangers.
Moving on to part 2, we need to look at the attackers themselves and the conspiracy behind this.
So who was actually behind this? The record points definitively to Al-Qaeda, a militant extremist network. And it's crucial to understand they didn't just act out of nowhere. This strike against the U.S. was fueled by deep-seated political grievances, specifically regarding Western intervention in the Middle East, combined with very strict, radical ideological beliefs. It was a deeply calculated move.
Because this plot was anything but impulsive. It was a carefully phased conspiracy that actually took years to put together. Osama bin Laden was the primary financier and the leader, but Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was really the principal architect here. He was the one who took this dark concept and turned it into reality, from the drawing board all the way to recruiting and training the hijackers.
But pulling off something of this magnitude required way more than just a couple of masterminds, right? It took a coordinated global cell of 19 hijackers, and they were backed by a whole network of logisticians and operatives like the infamous Hamburg cell. These guys were moving money, attending flight schools in the US, and living completely under the radar across multiple countries just to bring this plot to life.
Now let's pivot to part 3, the severe consequences of the attacks.
The immediate reaction on the ground was an unprecedented absolute lockdown. Every single commercial flight over the U.S. was grounded instantly, and massive evacuations began. But what's really fascinating and tragic is how quickly that local emergency morphed into a massive geopolitical response. Within weeks, the U.S. launched global military operations in Afghanistan, which fundamentally altered the West's footprint in the Middle East.
Back at home, the fallout created this really complex, tragic dual reality. On one hand, official records show a devastating spike in hate crimes and discrimination targeting Muslim Americans. But concurrently, Muslim American communities were right there on the front lines, publicly condemning the attacks, joining in the chaotic recovery efforts, and trying to navigate a cultural landscape that had suddenly become incredibly fraught and suspicious.
Internationally, governments pretty much locked arms and rewrote their domestic security protocols almost overnight. But culturally, the sheer shock of the event spawned a much darker phenomenon. Despite massive, exhaustive official investigations, widespread conspiracy theories started popping up and taking root, and they actually became a heavily documented, lasting part of the whole post-9/11 era.
Which brings us to part 4, long-term impacts and investigations. The ripple effects of this day destroyed so much more than just buildings. Global markets took a nosedive. and the aviation and tourism industries were basically brought to their knees. But the most tragic ongoing cost has been biological. The toxic dust from Ground Zero condemned thousands of survivors and heroic first responders to chronic, fatal respiratory illnesses and cancers. It's a tragedy that is literally still claiming lives today.
So how did such a massive security failure even happen? Well, to figure that out, the U.S. launched some of the most extensive probes in history. The FBI meticulously tracked the hijackers' every move. The 9/11 Commission famously called it a failure of imagination and pushed through sweeping security overhauls. The CIA audited its own intelligence blind spots, and structural engineers did deep dives into exactly how those seemingly invincible towers actually fell.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, Reconstruction and Historical Memorials.
Lower Manhattan didn't just remain an open scar for long. The reconstruction effort was massive, deeply complex, and honestly, it wasn't just about replacing lost office space. It was this powerful statement of resilience. They designed a new architectural footprint that boldly looked to the future while fiercely honoring the past.
And right in the middle of those gleaming new skyscrapers, remembrance took precedence. Ground Zero was transformed into a solemn memorial and museum, featuring those massive, deep, reflecting pools set exactly where the original towers stood. It's not just a place for the public to mourn, it actually serves as the final resting place for many unidentified victims, cementing that human tragedy right in the physical heart of the city.
So, having walked through the timeline, the fallout, and the reconstruction, we're left with one enduring question to think about. How does our collective memory of September 11th continue to shape the policies, the security, and the society we navigate today? Because, as we've seen throughout this explainer, understanding this history isn't just about looking at the past. It's absolutely essential for understanding our present. Thanks for joining us.